Hey everyone, welcome back to Portal of Wisdom. I'm back today with another story for you. So if you are new to the channel, like and subscribe and click that little post notification bell so you get alerted when I post new videos. And now on to today's topic. Today we are going to talk about DuPont's lost gold mine in New Mexico. So Harry DuPont was a less than successful prospector. He was in his 40s when he met a young greenhorn, age 20, named Frank Thompson. And they had met in El Paso, Texas, and they quickly became friends, and they headed up to some lands in New Mexico that they had heard were very promising for prospectors. And they agreed that anything they found, they would evenly split and, would share everything equally. So DuPont had worked in various mining operations in differing capacities and roles and had a wealth of knowledge versus his new partner, Frank Thompson. Therefore, DuPont made most of the decisions. So DuPont and Thompson, they worked and prospected in a few mountain ranges in southern New Mexico, and they continued to have no luck, and they were moving further north into a new mountain range, no luck. They would hear some stories, move further north, check out some more areas, and again have no luck. So they gradually made their way pretty far north. And it was in 1881 that they made their way to Cuba, New Mexico, where a new copper mine was being opened. And at this point, I believe they had prospected for quite a while, had probably been pretty much out of money. So they got jobs that paid $1 per day, and they agreed to themselves to just work long enough to fund their next prospecting adventure. But if they were going to be out prospecting for quite some time, they were going to need to work for quite some time to put some money aside. So for 2 years, they labored in the copper mines, and they used their days off to prospect a little bit around the area here and there. And they headed north into the Guyana Mountains in search of promising outcroppings. And I believe this was when they had a couple of days off. So one day, just below the timberline on Guyana Peak in the summer of 1883, they discovered an outcropping of gold on the west side of the mountain. So it appeared to be very rich, so they went ahead and quit their jobs and they moved to the mountain. They found a little freshwater spring nearby and they set up camp very close to that. It was said it was less than 100 yards from their find or their outcropping. So they worked sunup to sundown and had eventually excavated a 40-foot tunnel following this rich vein of gold into the mountain. Then they hit a very rich pocket of gold-laced quartz that was impressively large. They knew now that they were going to be rich. Now they were finally able to crush a significant amount of gold-laced quartz to fill a couple of canvas ore sacks. So they decided it was time to head into town and cash it in for money. So they were careful to cover up the opening of the mine with rock and pine boughs and make it blend in and appear like the rest of the mountainside. So they took their gold to the Abraham Solomon store in Lagunitas, New Mexico, where the gentleman Abraham Solomon had met DuPont, and they had became friends when DuPont was working at the copper mine. So they felt comfortable doing business with this gentleman, Abraham Solomon, and his store. So Solomon took DuPont into his back office to negotiate the sale of the gold, while Thompson stayed out front. And after the deal, DuPont paid Thompson a $20 gold piece, while DuPont pocketed the remainder. Thompson was none the wiser that he was being taken for a ride and being swindled. So each week, for quite a while, they made their way to the store, and Thompson got his $20 gold piece for his week of work or so. And once back to the mine, DuPont had constructed a rock-lined chamber in the ground that he deposited his vast amount of money that he was amassing from the sale of this gold. So he had this little rock-lined chamber, and he had a flat top rock that went over top of it to create this hollow chamber, and he was amassing all the coins that he was gathering from each sale, and he was putting them in this rock chamber that was topped by this large flat stone, and then he covered the stone with soil. So it basically was a small little hidden vault or chamber that DuPont kept his money in, or at least most of his money. He probably kept a little bit of pocket change on him. So one trip to the store, Solomon and DuPont were careless, and they did not get the door to the office closed. And Thompson was able to peer in and see Solomon counting out stacks of gold coins for DuPont. And on the way back to the mine, Thompson questioned DuPont because, of course, Thompson only got his $20 gold piece. So he questioned DuPont about this uneven disparity in payment for each man, and DuPont tried to claim that he had to keep some of the money to buy supplies. Then Thompson reminded him that they each bought their own supplies, and then DuPont refused to talk about it after that. So, more gold sales transactions occurred at the store, and they still favored DuPont, and somehow Thompson did not say a word. Finally, in July of 1884, DuPont and Thompson did not show up for their somewhat weekly sale of their gold. So Abraham Solomon sent out a search party to the Guyana Peak, and he wanted to see what happened to the two men. So they found a badly decomposed body of DuPont whose skull had been crushed. So they assumed Thompson had also been killed, but they could not find his body. So a few days later, the county sheriff had arrested a sheep herder named Perfecto Padilla for the two men's murder. So he admitted he had watched the men work at a distance before, but he said he did not kill them. Padilla admitted he had also found DuPont's body many days earlier, and since he was dead, Padilla did help himself to DuPont's watch from his pocket. So a trial was held, and Padilla was found guilty of Harry DuPont's murder, and he was hanged. People came to the mountain looking for the mine, but the men had concealed it so well that no one was able to find it. Then in 1892, a Colorado man named Manuel Chavez was hunting turkeys in the Guyana Mountains with his friends when he came across a well-concealed mine, and he made his way into the mine, and once he lit some matches or made a makeshift torch, he discovered at the back of the mine there were numerous gold-rich quartz rocks laying about on the floor of the back of the mine. So he also found rusting mining tools, and he assumed he had found an old Spanish mine. So he stuffed his pockets with as much of this gold quartz laced rock as he could, and he decided to keep it a secret from his buddies that he was on this turkey hunt with. So he wanted to come back on his own and not share his discovery and be able to explore a little more. So Chavez had his gold assayed when he got back to Colorado, where he was from, and it was determined to be very rich vein of gold. So Manuel Chavez, he wrote to his father in Albuquerque, New Mexico about the find, and he drew out and included a map that he drew of his discovery to share some of the details with his father. And he wanted to travel with his father to this mine. And unfortunately, he found out not too long later that his father died many days later after he wrote the letter. And it seemed that the map that Manuel had drawn and sent to his father was now missing. And it sounds like this might have been the only map that he drew from memory. He didn't draw another one for himself. So he eventually returned to the Guyana Mountains and the peak, but he could never find the mine again. So in 1895, two prospectors named Gordon Miller and John Turk, they had heard about the lost DuPont mine, and they came to look for it. So by the time they came to look for it, the season was coming to an end, and they did find a promising lead. They found a place where gold ore had been separated from quartz, so they felt they were close, but the snow came. So they stayed in Cuba, New Mexico for the winter, and they came back in the spring. So they searched all summer, and finally in late August, they found a human skull. Like DuPont's skull, it was crushed. So they called the sheriff, and all agreed that it was probably Thompson's skull since his body was still missing and never found. A few days later, Gordon found a large flat rock that was covered in debris, and he dusted it off, and he lifted that flat rock to reveal a large ore sack full of hundreds of $20 gold pieces. So they counted them out, and they discovered that they were $42,600 richer now. So they now knew that the mine had to have a very rich ore vein in it. But as they searched for another year, they could never find the mine. So they eventually gave up, and they divided their remaining funds, and they went their separate ways. So late in the afternoon, one day in January of 1900, a man rode up to a priest walking across the street, and the man was on this bay horse, and he handed the priest envelope, and the priest assumed it was just a donation for the church, and he put it in his pocket, and the man rode away. Later that night, the priest opened that envelope, and he was shocked by what he read. It was a confession to murder by Frank Thompson. He confessed that he killed DuPont, and he felt horrible when he heard that the sheep herder Padilla was hung for it. He explained that each day he became angrier at getting swindled by DuPont, and things came to a head after returning from the store and starting to mine the next day. DuPont was holding a drill bit, and Thompson was striking that drill bit with an 8-pound hammer. And as he became more and more upset, and one of the strikes, he went ahead and did not strike the drill bit. He brought the hammer down on DuPont's head and killed him instantly. So Thompson said he hid out for 15 years and eventually came back to find the mine and get some more funds. But he could no longer locate the mine. There were now many goat herding and grazing operations on and around the mountain, and it didn't look like it did before. So when he couldn't find the mine, he rode to Albuquerque and he wrote out the confession letter. But he waited until after New Year's Day of 1900 to give it to the priest. And then Thompson was never seen again. So the mine appears that it could still be lost somewhere in those mountains or on that peak. And it sounds like the mountain has maybe changed quite a bit, and it sounds like it may have been concealed very well. And I'm sure if they didn't want people getting into their mine, they probably did conceal it very well every time they went into town or in case they were followed on the way back, and probably had to make sure that there was no one watching them when they broke the mine back open and mined it all the time. So it could still be in those mountains, but that is the story of DuPont's lost gold mine. Thanks for listening.